At first, it feels like something subtle, almost invisible. You're out with friends, hearing the same conversations you've heard for years about work stress, about the weekend plans, about someone's drama that will repeat itself next week. You nod, you laugh, you sip your drink, but somewhere inside you, a heaviness starts to grow. The words land differently now. They don't fill you, they drain you. It's as if you're sitting in the same room but breathing a different kind of air, one that no one else seems to notice. You smile to keep the peace, but in your body, you feel like you've already left. You wonder what's happening. You wonder why people you once felt so close to now feel like strangers. It's not that you stopped loving them. It's not that you've suddenly become cold or antisocial. It's that something inside you cracked open. You're seeing the world differently now, sharper, clearer. And in that clarity, the masks that everyone wears become obvious. It's almost unbearable, because you can feel what's underneath: the insecurity behind the confidence, the pain behind the gossip, the longing behind the laughter. And you can't unsee it. Carl Jung had a name for this shift. He didn't just call it awakening. He called it individuation, the long, sometimes lonely process of becoming who you truly are. For most of your life, you wore a mask. Jung called this mask the persona. It wasn't fake, it was survival. It was how you fit in, how you stayed safe, how you felt accepted. You played the role people expected of you. You learned when to smile, when to stay quiet, when to agree even when your soul whispered no. And for a while, it worked. But awakening begins when that mask starts to crack. It happens when you can no longer silence the whisper that says, "There's more than this." It's the moment you start to say no to what drains you, even when you don't have the courage yet to say yes to what lights you up. And when that happens, you quickly realize something painful: many of your connections were built on the mask, not on your real self. When the mask falls, those connections wobble. Some collapse completely. That's why awakening feels lonely at first. You're no longer showing up as the version of you that others knew, and the new version isn't fully born yet. You're in between. You walk into a room, and your nervous system still prepares for the old performance: to please, to fit in, to keep the peace. But your soul refuses to go along with it. That inner tug-of-war exhausts you more than the people themselves. The fatigue doesn't come from being social, it comes from pretending. And then, just when it feels too heavy, Jung's other great teaching emerges: the shadow. The shadow isn't the monster under the bed. It's the parts of yourself you were told to hide. Your anger. Your jealousy. Your desire. But also your creativity. Your brilliance. Your power. Awakening makes you see the shadow more clearly. At first, it's uncomfortable. You notice all the things you tried to bury. But then, you begin to notice it in others too. You sit across from a friend, and you realize the joke they're making is really a shield for their pain. You hear someone bragging, and instead of judging, you sense their need to feel worthy. You see someone trying to control everything, and deep down, you recognize their fear of being powerless. Suddenly, conversations don't feel light anymore. They feel loaded. Not because people are bad, but because you see through the mask they don't even realize they're wearing. And your body doesn't want to play along anymore. It craves truth. It craves depth. But here's where it gets even more challenging. The shadows you see in others are often the same ones you've carried yourself. That friend who always has to be right reminds you of the times you used to cling to control. That colleague who constantly needs validation mirrors the part of you that still aches to be seen. Awakening shows you the mirror everywhere. At first, it makes you resentful: why can't people just wake up? But slowly, painfully, you realize the real work isn't fixing others. It's integrating yourself. And that's where the danger of awakening lies. Some people stop halfway. They fall into spiritual ego, convincing themselves they are awake and everyone else is asleep. But that's just another mask, a subtler persona. True awakening doesn't separate you from others, it reconnects you. Not through pretense, but through compassion. Compassion for the people still lost in their masks. Compassion for yourself, stumbling and learning. Compassion for the younger version of you who wore the mask because it was the only way to survive. With compassion, something shifts. The exhaustion lessens. You don't feel the same desperate need to escape. Instead, you start choosing where your energy flows. You start saying no without guilt, and yes without fear. You no longer blame people for being who they are, you simply decide who you can walk with, and who you must bless from afar. And slowly, the loneliness turns into clarity. You begin to attract people who don't need your mask, who can sit with your truth. Conversations start to feel like oxygen instead of sandpaper. Relationships feel lighter, freer. It doesn't happen overnight, but it happens. Because once you stop hiding, the people who see you truly see you, can finally find you. And that's when awakening reveals its gift. It wasn't here to isolate you. It was here to strip away the false connections so that real ones could be born. It was here to teach you that depth will always feel fewer in numbers but richer in meaning. It was here to show you that loneliness wasn't the end of the path, it was the doorway to a truer belonging than you ever thought possible. It usually starts in the quietest ways. You don't wake up one morning with a trumpet announcing that you've awakened. Instead, you start noticing little cracks in the world you once thought was solid. A dinner with friends that used to feel fun now feels strangely heavy. A conversation about weekend plans, gossip, or complaints that once entertained you now feels shallow, almost like background noise you can't bear anymore. You sit there, nodding and smiling, but inside it feels as if you've been transported onto another planet. The words still reach your ears, but they no longer touch your soul. Something in you has shifted, and though you can't always explain it, you know it's real. You're not bored. You're not ungrateful. You're awakening. The strange thing about awakening is that it doesn't feel like a celebration at first. It feels like loss. Loss of connection. Loss of belonging. Loss of ease. Suddenly, you notice how different you've become. People you love still sound the same, still act the same, still carry the same rhythms, but you feel like you're dancing to different music altogether. And no one warned you that clarity can come with loneliness. That seeing more can also mean feeling more separate. For most of your life, your nervous system was wired for survival. It adjusted to chaos, noise, performance, and pretense. If you're an empath, or highly sensitive, this went even deeper. You didn't just listen to people, you absorbed them. You didn't just observe moods, you carried them in your body like they were your own. You became a sponge for other people's storms, and while it helped you survive, it also drained you in ways you couldn't name. Then awakening happens, and suddenly the static you once lived with becomes unbearable. Your awareness sharpens like a lens being brought into focus. You notice the energy behind words, the tension beneath smiles, the dissonance in conversations that once felt harmless. You pick up on lies, projections, unspoken fears, not because you're trying, but because you can't help it. And your body, still wired in the old way, reacts with tension, fatigue, or emotional overload. A simple gathering can feel like running a marathon. A casual chat can feel like sandpaper against your spirit. It isn't that people are bad. It's that you're no longer wearing the mask that once made these exchanges tolerable. Carl Jung called that mask the persona, the version of yourself you created to fit in, to be safe, to be liked. Awakening is when that mask begins to crack. And when it does, you realize many of your relationships were built around it, not around your real self. That's why connection feels harder now. The mask is gone, but not everyone in your life knows how to meet the person underneath. This is where the exhaustion comes from, not from people themselves, but from the tension between who you used to be and who you're becoming. Your nervous system still tries to perform, to shrink, to please, even as your soul cries out for truth, depth, and alignment. That inner tug-of-war is what leaves you drained after socializing. And yet, this loneliness has a purpose. It's not punishment, it's preparation. In solitude, your energy recalibrates. Your system learns to regulate at this new level of awareness. Slowly, you begin to interact differently. You stop absorbing every mood around you. You stop personalizing every silence. You learn to sense without drowning, to feel without losing yourself. You begin to anchor into your own essence, so solidly that the noise of others no longer pulls you off balance. From here, your relationships transform. You stop choosing them out of survival or guilt. You stop saying yes just to keep peace. You stop shrinking to be accepted. Instead, you choose connections that feel alive, that give as much as they take, that allow your authenticity to breathe. Some people will drift away in this process, not because you're rejecting them, but because they only knew how to relate to your mask. That grief is real, but it clears the space for something new. And something new always arrives. Slowly, almost quietly, you begin to attract people who match your frequency. They don't need you to pretend. They don't project their pain onto you. They can sit with you in silence or depth without needing performance. These are soul-aligned connections, and they often come after a season of solitude. That solitude wasn't emptiness, it was sacred ground preparing you for resonance. Jung believed the goal of life wasn't perfection but integration, to bring together every part of yourself, your shadow, your light, your wounds, your wisdom. Awakening isn't about running away from people or living on a mountaintop. It's about embodying your wholeness so deeply that no one else's noise can throw you off your center again. And when you reach that space, something profound shifts. You stop chasing love because you become love. You stop begging for acceptance because you embody worth. You stop fearing disconnection because you finally realize you are never truly alone when you are anchored in your own truth. The fatigue, the grief, the strange sense of isolation, it was all part of the transformation. Because awakening is less about leaving the world behind, and more about meeting it as your truest self. And from that place, every connection you make becomes sacred. Every word you speak carries weight. Every presence you share becomes healing. That's the gift of awakening. Not escape. Not superiority. But wholeness. And from wholeness, life itself begins to respond differently. People, opportunities, and love find their way to you, not because you sought them out, but because you finally aligned with the frequency of who you've been all along.